What is up guys, Greedy Knight here with the Special Investigation Breakdown. I'll be going over the setup and overall matchup for each Special Investigation monster using Charge Blade. Let's get into it. Special Investigations are the final tier of difficulty for all monsters available in Anomaly hunts. Every monster has 100k health at a minimum with bloated threshold, so you won't be able to rely on part break flinches to carry you through the hunt like in lower ranks. They become tanks that require you to earn flinches, part breaks, and quest clears. To do this, you need to have a min-max setup and understand the matchup to defeat the monster in a reasonable amount of time, especially with investigation 25 to 35 minute time limits. All without carding beyond the quest requirement. It is best practice to aim for quote-unquote no-hit runs because most mons can 2-tap you into a stretcher. Charge Blade is the perfect multi-tool to tackle every matchup, and this is how I toppled every special investigation with my favorite morphing weapon. Your setup consists of your buddies and followers. Time attackers skip this part, but basically you run both Hunting Horn, Hinoa, and Utushi for her healing support and his element plus attack boosts. The Blight Negation song is a nice bonus for relevant matchups. Your Palicos are healing cats, using the healing clover bats for berserk sets and all of the moves that say heal the hunter. This way, when the monster is pinning you against a wall whilst you are at low health, your buddies and followers can airdrop healing so you can counter attack without the risk of carding on low health. Arena type maps are the best for special investigations because it prevents the monster from escaping to another area, and you max out spearbirds on a deadly hunt. The main drawback is that the monster's health is more inflated than non-arena versions of the special investigation, so you will have longer but simpler fights to deal with. Infernal Springs is the worst of the three because it has a dedicated slope area which induces vertigo when dueling a monster for the high ground. It also features a massive wall for monsters with clinging moves to cling onto, killing your DPS. Arena is the second best map. While it is mostly flat, the top section does have a ledge which can interrupt your guard or attacks with the ledge climb animation, preventing you from guarding the monster's attack. On top of that, the ledge bug blocks morphing events, preventing you from getting onto it while you're using your slingshot move. The best map ends up being Forlorn Arena. There are no clingable walls, slopes, and the ledge that is on the map is small enough to avoid for most hunts. Some monsters like Gyaratortoise can only spawn on Infernal Springs since it has water, so you have to take the L for those monsters. While it is the meta to run the Demon Petalace for the max attack Spearbird boost, the Absolute Petalace gives you the maximum health and defense to survive the special investigation damage at the cost of 5 points of raw attack. For Super Spam, it's a no-brainer to equip it since your damage will primarily be element file based, which doesn't account for raw attack in its damage calculation. For Berserk Spinning Axe, you get more blue scroll time, making you harder to cart. The key note here is that element and element file are unaffected by this change, so the only reduction is in your raw attack. This changes many breakpoints for carting. It shifts many 1 to 2 tap attacks into 2 to 3 tap attacks. The increased health and defense allows you to make a few mistakes without getting punished with a cart. In terms of builds, the meta compilation is a rough guide to min-maxing for damage and function. Guard up is a law since every monster can and will explode. Berserk sets only need 1 level since the red health gimmick can negate the damage, while dereliction builds require 2 to 3 levels of guard up. There is a list of unblockable attacks that require you to dodge instead of guard, like Ambush and Risen Shigaru's ultimate. Guard / Embolden needs to be run at the correct levels of knockback so you can reduce everything to light or medium knockback. Light knockback is the requirement to maintain Spinning Axe, and it negates guard chip damage entirely. Medium knockback is the lowest investment of guard since you can still pop a super, albeit with chip damage. The Risens have a few moves that require you to guard point even with Embolden 3. Rapid Morph is a staple function skill for this tier. Monsters have continuous attacks and have short breaks in between onslaughts, so its 10% speed boost matters for most middle to later investigations. You can confirm SADs without getting hit, assuming your timing and execution are perfect. For sharpness maintenance, Heaven Sent level 1 is the best sharpness skill in the game for Spinning Axe, since you can reset to purple sharpness for the entire hunt, without needing to manually sharpen. Defense Grinder 1 and 2 ignores sharpness decay from blocking, allowing you to stay in white for longer. Since Element File doesn't even use attack boost for calculations, you can skip out on the 5% anti-species boost for super spam, an already low raw investment build and playstyle. We aren't time attacking here. For Spinning Axe, we are using bonus update Berserk sets for max damage chops. If you don't like Berserk, just run a non-Berserk charm with non-strafe Mail of Hellfire augments. But you will take longer to clear the hunt due to the reduced element damage output. Do note that you do not use Berserk sets for Risen since you will die from the drain and the lack of Blood Blight. In general, CSS can go into most matchups without much issue. The main requirement is at least one good accessible hit zone to drill down on. Its biggest strength is that you can bulldoze through most of the monster's aggression without letting up your buzzsaw damage. It is a reactionary and precise playstyle with low commitment double chops. Intrepid Heart and Blood Blight will be consistent with this playstyle, giving you breathing room to make mistakes throughout the hunt. The main drawback is a lower damage output compared to Super Spam, forcing a test of endurance for every hunt. It does require more inputs per interaction, so it can be a draining playstyle for an already long hunt. For Super Spam, you run the bonus update Dereliction sets. You remove hard resistances to fit in Rapid Morph and Embolden as necessary. In the end, you drop 2 hard resistances and at least a level 2 slot. Super Spam is a notably pickier playstyle requiring good body shape, an accessible set of elemental hit zones, and enough time to dump them onto the monster without getting hit. It requires a mountain of monster and weapon knowledge. It has a simpler execution, but your recognition and judgment of the monster's onslaught as well as your positioning needs to be solid in order to do well with this playstyle. To get a sub 10 minute run against special investigation monsters, you should be able to line up all 5 files on any targeted hit zone with 70% consistency. Time attackers have closer to 90 to 100% consistency in their runs with 3+ supers every minute. On average, you will be dumping at least 20 supers during the hunt. Here's the rough breakdown of each matchup. Experience with the monster using a specific playstyle is everything here, so practice with your intended playstyle and just learn how to interact with each attack to quote-unquote solve the matchup. Most monsters fall to the elements, it's a question of which playstyle to use. For the average player, Super Spam targets the blobby and large monsters with generous elemental hit zones, while Spinning Axe targets the noodly and fast monsters with polarized elemental hit zones. There's a thing I call a true SAD window, which are openings after a monster's combo that lets you SAD with impunity, provided you have Rapid Morph 3 equipped. In order to output good SAD damage, you need to exploit every single true SAD window every single time, meaning you need to have the tell of each of the monster's combo memorized, and practice your Charge Blade text to pop an SAD on ideal hit zones. Your plan B is to turtle behind your shield and wait for really big openings to drop your supers. As for Spinning Axe, you will need to use Ready Sense and guard points in between your double chops to stay defensively aggressive against the monster's onslaught. The main thing to practice is your aim, since it will determine how much damage you do on a given double chop. You should be aiming for the head and other weak spots by making full use of the range of your double chops and your advancing chops. Aerial Spinning Axe comes up as a requirement for exactly 4 hunts: Giratodus, Zenogre, Raknikadaki, and Valstrax. This is because they have grounded shit zones with their good targets on the back or elevated in general, out of reach of both element files and your grounded buzzsaw. Evade Extender serves to replace morphing events as a mobility option, while Air Dash lets you reach the vertical hit zones with solid damage and a powerful file burst. If you can't land a file burst, bail out with a regular aerial chop, which does combo into a double chop once on the ground. This isn't to say you can't use Air Dash in other matchups, but it is preference to do so. The Raptors are your warm-up into special investigations with Spinning Axe. They are difficult if you have little to no experience playing Spinning Axe. Paired with the ability to 2 to 3 tap you using non-berserk sets, these fights feel like a disrespectful chore. A fair number of their attacks have no knockback, so you have to watch for the ones that do. You save your Intrepid Heart or Ready stance to bulldoze through their flimsy onslaught. Also slotting in respective status resistances invalidates Great Baggy and Great Roggy. These monsters will enable you to output some of the highest double chop damage in the game because they are so easy. The bone monsters are rough mathematically. On paper they have solid hit zones, but during the actual hunt, those hit zones are only available during parts of the hunt. Arzuros is the easiest of the bunch since his arms are accessible for good chunks of the hunt, but Lagambi and Volvidon move around enough to force you to be patient, resulting in an artificially longer hunt. They will slide away and then slide back to their target, so if you are playing solo, that target will always be you. You wait for them to return and then you resume your onslaught. Volvidon's Sonic Roll can only be toppled with a raw attack, so you can make use of air dash or your vertical slams to cause it to stumble. Slot in paralysis resistance to ignore its status shenanigans. Barring Bishaten, this is the first anomaly rank where you can abuse super spam. They have the keynotes of a good matchup, a blobby body, slow attacks, and generous hit zones. Just practice against their combos and they should not be able to touch you. On the Buzzsaw side, Bishaten is a fun fight and you have a lot of interaction with him. Focus the tail whenever he stands on it to get topples, mind his multi-hit combos, and slot in paralysis resistance to avoid the paralysis fruit. Alba Acnesom are super spam matchups. Royal Ludroth is another good matchup, so just watch for its attacks and shrivel it with fire files. Barroth is uniformly weak to ice, but you can cheese the fight by locking it in the arena where it can't mud up after you peel it off, then use water and swap to fire to get max damage on both states. Time attackers will use ice, but it was fun to see 1700 plus file damage on this hunt. Bazarios is an example of a subpar SAD matchup. It has sub 20 elemental hit zones until it revs up. Once you start breaking parts, that is when element exploit values become permanent. For Spinning Axe, Acnesom is hit the head while ready stancing everything else simulator. Do mind the one pin it has, since it does take you out of Spinning Axe. Cyanator is the only super spam matchup in this tier, and it's just Hermitor with a knife and a very breakable shell. Respect the claw attacks more so than Hermitor. For Spinning Axe, Somnicanth is a joke once you slap on Sleep Resistance 3. You only have to watch for its physical attacks and their Shell Bomb. Blood Orange Bishaten is the same as its base species, but now it has a flamethrower move and changes out fruit for Pinecone grenades. Giratotus is a wall of health and it forces you to swap off element. Air Dash plus Blast will enable your raw and status damage to reach the jank hit zones of this fish. Since a fair number of its attacks have poor tells, you can just evade its attacks instead of trying to guard and counter them. Puke and Rathian are super spam matchups, both have their best hit zones on the head, so use this time to practice targeted SAEDs. For Spinning Axe, Toby is a solid matchup because it has a massive tail hit zone and a reliable head hit zone to slash. Anjanath is a quirky matchup. On paper and in practice it looks terrible, but it also has a built-in topple mechanic that stacks with Curio topple, so you just need to bulldoze through its onslaught to be rewarded with long windows of buzzsawing its face. Nargacuga is the only SAED matchup, and you target the wings for maximum damage. Mind the jukes and the swerves, and then retaliate with your super. Garangom was a good super spam matchup for lower tiers, but it moves its Moss arm out of the way so frequently that it's just better to run Spinning Axe here. Barioth has jank elemental hit zones and high mobility to deny reliable super spam, so use your buzzsaw on its face and teeth for maximum damage. Magnamolo is a test of skill for Spinning Axe. There are multi-part hits that command your respect, and you need to apply constant damage to compensate for its mediocre hit zones. Almadron is the only SAD matchup here, and it is an impressive one, for him. All of its hit zones do good damage, so just counter its onslaught to fry that mud monster. It gives plenty of windows to chain super after super. Auroracanth is a Somnicanth that you have to respect all of its moves because they are changed to ice instead of sleep. This is one of the first matchups you do need Embolden for. Gosharag equips ice weapons that both deal massive damage to you while also being its weak spot. You have to dodge their frost attacks, because they slow down your wire bug output and therefore your ready stance and morphing advance count. Arachnikadaki is a rough hunt mathematically, only exposing its head to grounded attacks during specific animations. Its claw hit zones are tucked behind its webbed legs, so a miscalculated SAD angle will result in sub 200 damage per file. To reliably interact with the web mechanic, Spinning Axe is a playstyle of choice because it applies raw damage in conjunction with element damage. To maximize damage, you use air dash to reach the head hit zone. Mizutsune is slippery enough and has jank hit zones to warrant Spinning Axe for consistent damage. You can get good damage with SAD, but it will be with its back fin and fingers. Rathalos and Astalos are super spam matchups, but require you to recognize and exploit true SAD windows to strike the good hit zones. Astalos' elemental hit zones are subpar except for its tail, so aim for it whenever you can, while pumping your supers as often as you can. Diablos is another free SAD matchup, so let your files rip while blocking its hard-hitting attacks. You can get a free SAD window if you shatter its horn, 1 window per horn. Seregios is a tougher SAD matchup. It has higher mobility, but it has the hit zones of a good matchup. So you will need to exploit its good hit zones while avoiding its projectiles and claw attacks. Zinogre is just a bad matchup mathematically since its good hit zones are tucked behind its back and its head denies all grounded options. Aerial Spinning Axe puts in work against this Thunderwolf, but you will have to learn timings for its multi-slam attacks. Normally it would be a good impact file SAD matchup, but that build is trash in Sunbreak. Lunagaran is a Spinning Axe matchup because all it does is bob, weave, and slash. It leaves few openings for SADs, and its hit zones dial from bad to good to bad as the fight progresses, so you need a reliable form of damage in your spinning chops. Magmadron is just a cleaner version of Almadron, giving you more SAD windows than its base form, including a triple SAD window with its nuke. Tigrex is one of the few mid-game mons that lets you pop multiple SADs in a row, so it's just a free SAD matchup as long as you guard/counter peek its roar combos. Espinas is another free SAD matchup like Diablos. You respect its options, but you hit hard enough to shatter its thresholds, resulting in a bunch of topples. If you get hit by the paralysis, you cart, so use paralysis resistance deco if you doubt your ability to guard every breath attack. Gormagala has subpar fire hit zones, and its main good elemental hit zone, the wing arm, is tucked out of range until it enters its Magala state. Spinning Axe will provide consistent damage on slightly weaker elemental damage hit zones, and supplement that damage with cutting damage. Basilgeuse ends up being an SAD matchup by default. Good hit zones in the tail and head with a lot of slow animations to boot, but it covers its weakness with a spattering of time bombs to interrupt your SAD animation. You have to watch it and its skills to determine if you can safely pop a super. You will be forced to turtle behind your shield if there are mines around you, which is a lame majority of the hunt. Just be patient and take your opportunities to dump files. Hyrakadaki shares its issue with Rachna, but it has good enough hit zones to allow super spam, and has a less obnoxious move pool. You can let SADs rip because it has plenty of SAD windows, modulating in potency as it enters its many states, but it will range from 400 to 1k damage per file. Rajang is a Spinning Axe matchup for the usual reason. It's fast and permits little time to pop an SAD. Hit the face and horns for maximum damage, while its arms will force you to bounce on non-element discharge chops. Respect the beam for a free opening, and mind the command grab. Due to the hardened head mechanic of the Metal Wraths, it's best practice to bypass cutting shit zones with element file, super spam. You will be aiming for the wings whenever they become available, and once molten, the head. You need to make full use of SAD windows to bully these monsters into a grave, so learn their combos, guard each attack, and then let your files rip during their reprieves. Knocking them out of the ignited state denies them the ability to perform a Curio explosion, a common feature of these later tier monsters. Just as with their base forms, you use Spinning Axe. They gain a few moves, but your strategy is ultimately the same. Buzzsaw their faces while blocking their aggression. The main mix-up you do need to learn is to use Ready Stance plus Guard Point to block the staggered combos. You should gain yellow or red shield charge from these interactions, so perform a foul load and rev your engine to resume buzzsawing with fouls in tow. All of these monsters are SAD matchups. Flaming Espinas is just weak to water and has a slightly less annoying toolkit than base Espinas's paralysis poison combo. The only thing to watch out for is the nuke since it's unguardable, but you Superman dive to avoid it. As long as you cause a Curio topple during this fight, it won't get mad enough to pop 2 nukes during this interaction. Seething Basil Geese is a boring ass fight. It spams way too many mines that many of the previous true combo SADs are now just gambles of whether a mine landed near you or not. While you can position out of range of mines, Seething has long enough range to cover conventional escapes. You spend a lot of time turtling behind your shield, waiting for an opportunity to pop your files. Chaotic Ore is one of the harder fights because it's basically Risen Shigaru, but the main difference is that you have lifesteal on board. You use fire because the average damage is better than dragons, which is the difference between being able to hit either arm versus the right arm specifically. Time attackers will go for dragon, while us mortals will use fire. You have to respect all combos and only attack when Chaotic Gore remains idle after attacks. It is a mere warm-up for Risen Shigaru. The Risen Trio is also a set of SAD matchups. Risen Chameleos is the only free endgame matchup since it melts to fire and gives plenty of opportunities to pop countermorph / boosted SADs. Risen Kushala has lower but consistent damage values to enable you to just touch it with files for decent damage. It has many SAD windows, so your damage output will be based more on how many SADs you can pump into it versus pumping out high damage files. Risen Teostra's moves can one-shot and two-shot you. There are a fair number of SAD windows, but they are frame tight. You have to hit the head with every SAD for optimal damage, and as it switches modes, it dials up or shrivels your water element file's efficiency. This is the final test of whether you can topple Risen Shigaru. Risen Valstrax is a fun fight. You block attacks, avoid its dragon mines, and attack whenever possible. It has many combos that only last 2 or 3 attacks before it's your turn to return fire. While you can use element, you have to specifically hit the toes whenever it's dragon hearted up, so it's just more reasonable to recommend raw / status builds. Due to its ludicrous amount of range, it's one of the few hunts where morphing advance has little use. The only consistent access to its chest and head is with Air Dash's elevated uppercuts, but you do target the wings whenever they are glowing red. Lastly, during ambush, avoid the dragon mines and Superman dive the actual ambush. Risen Shigaru is the final boss of Special Investigations. Your SAD windows need to be frame perfect, otherwise there is enough time for it to act again after an attack has ended. You aim specifically for the arms and head. A single missed guard point will result in a lot of damage taken. Its Nova will put you in the center of rotating pillars inching towards you. Sheath your weapon after the roar effect wears off, wire bug upwards and outwards to escape. If you get hit by these pillars, they stun, so that will result in an auto cart. Your main alternatives are to Farcaster after you have sheathed your weapon, or thread the needle with morphing advance. This fight took at least 20 attempts on my end, so don't get discouraged and just keep grinding the matchup. Overall, Special Investigations were fun. I was forced to push my limits as a player, and as a Chargeblade user, I learned every single aspect about the game so I could optimize my sets and my playstyles, and yet a single mistake always landed me in a cart. With the absurd endgame sets, it was refreshing to actually fear moves instead of expecting to safely tank everything. They provided enough protection to prevent most one-taps. You had to go on long streaks of the hunt without getting hit to get decent times on runs. I hope they bring a version of this feature back because it gets boring oppressing monsters with broken sets. At least have them put up a fight. Like if this video was useful to you, consider subscribing if you want to see more Monster Hunter content like this. Comment your thoughts on the video. That's all I got for this one. Greedy Knight, signing out.